Hi, this is Felipe Osorio, and welcome to Second Earth Alternative. All right, so today I wanted to talk about the CIA and UFOs. And if you saw my last episode, we were talking about how skeptics reacted to the recent revelations that the Pentagon has been giving regarding UFOs. And I have to be honest, in the last couple of weeks, it's been quite an avalanche of information that has come out. And it seems for decades and decades, ufologists have been waiting for this day of disclosure. And now the Pentagon officials are revealing all this information. And frankly, it feels like the media is not really reacting that well. I mean, they, blasted this story for maybe like a day or two.
Terrified me for years.
Even though it's one of the
So
most, important questions ever asked, in human history. But outside of that, the scientific community also wasn't reacting well, because although some of them were willing to admit that this UFO that the Pentagon released from the gun camera, although they said the UFO seems like it's unusual or it seems like it's unidentified, they refuse to concede the possibility that this is not human.
Do so want to believe that they're ET, because it would make the world a more interesting place.
And I think it's very clear, if you listen to the interview from Luis Elizondo, that what he's talking about is something that is not capable of being made by humans, because it's defying every law of physics that we know of. And I mean, listen to him.
It's truly beyond next generation technology.
And if you, for the scientists who really understand physics, if you really want to understand how these crafts can break the laws of physics, or seemingly are breaking the laws of physics, I highly recommend reading the transcript from Bob Lazar, the physicist or claimed physicist who worked at Area 51. And I know there's a lot of people who may not agree with what he's saying, or they think there's holes to the story. I believe that Bob Lazar was being honest. So I'm not going to say for certain that it's, this is the way it is. But if you guys are interested, I highly recommend the transcript. Going back to the CIA UFO. So shortly after this avalanche of information about UFOs has been coming out in the last 2 weeks, the CIA decided to tweet a picture of a UFO. And here, it's like, I feel like the CIA turned into Donald Trump. It's like, that's the way that they talk to us. It's just through tweets now. But here's his tweet saying, trying to photograph a UFO. And if you click on it, it says, trying to photograph a UFO. You never know what you're going to find when browsing through the CIA's Freedom of Information Act archives. And then they even put a picture of a UFO, probably from the 50s. So let's do that. Let's go through the Freedom of Information Act archives that they've put forth, and let's see what we can find. So this is actually really cool, because I think this is not information that's very well publicized, because it's something that I personally discovered. And it was a memorandum in a document. And just to give you the background of what's going on here, basically right after the 1952 Washington, D.C. sightings that happened where UFOs were spotted over the White House, there was a committee that was set up in 1953. So here's the Robertson Panel. And basically, this was a panel that was headed in 1953. It was originally classified as a secret project, but was later released. And what was so interesting about this panel is, it says here, the CIA review itself was in response to widespread reports of unidentified flying objects, especially in the Washington, D.C. area. So this committee was specifically set up to essentially study what happened after 1952. And the reason why this particular document is talking about this committee is because this document comes from, comes from the August 1966. And between 1966 and 1968, the Air Force was prepping for this report called the Condon Report, which was the Air Force's recommendation or scientific recommendation about how to deal with unidentified flying objects. In the end, the Air Force did recommend that there's no scientific merit to studying UFOs. However, having looked at all these CIA documents, it seems very obvious to me that one, the Air Force was never given all the information about UFOs. the CIA constantly blocked access, and not just blocked access, but when they did give certain files, they were highly redacted. And that's what I discovered by looking at all these Freedom of Information Acts. But in this one particular file, on page 11, I mean, this is like a 53-page document, okay? So I don't recommend anybody go through this. It's not easy, and especially because if you look at it, it's really, really hard to decipher what it's saying here. But I went ahead and I tried my best to essentially transcribe what it says here. And this is really big because, guys, here's what's going on. The Air Force is setting up a new report in 1966 to 1968 about UFOs. In 1953, a scientific committee was set up to study UFOs after the 1952 sightings over Washington, D.C. This committee actually included, if you remember, or if you're a ufologist, you might know about J. Allen Hynek, who worked for Project Blue Book, started out as a skeptic, but later in his life actually became a UFO believer. Okay, so going back to the documents. So this document was basically written by the deputy director of scientific intelligence. This director was emailing the colonel of the Air Force. The important thing about this document, okay, is this last sentence. We are most anxious that further publicity not be given to the information that the panel was sponsored by the Central Intelligence Agency. Further, we cannot authorize the listings of the personnel participating in the discussions in any unclassified relays. So, to the Air Force, the CIA is not able to give the listing of the personnel participating, but not just that, they're admitting that the 1952 panel was a CIA staged scientific committee, meaning it wasn't scientific at all. It was just a disinformation campaign. So, thank you, CIA, for telling us to look through your archives, because now, outside of your little, Donald Trump tweets of UFOs, we're actually seeing that, yes, indeed, you guys have been lying to us or been, basically changing the entire public opinion of all the scientists, because in two different important reports, the 1953 Robertson Panel and the 1968 Condon report set up by the Air Force, in which they're asking for CIA UFO information from you guys, from the CIA, and this is like, why would you stage entire scientific committee if you didn't believe there's something beyond that you didn't want to share to the public? So let's put this in perspective. The Pentagon has just released a UFO from a gun camera. The CIA has just released tweets of UFO pictures. And now, by watching this episode, you have now discovered, and I can give you the link right over here, a new document that demonstrates that the 1953 committee set up to study UFOs after the Washington, D.C. 1952 sightings that went over the White House, that this committee was set up by the CIA. So, there you go, guys. If the skeptics, if hearing a Pentagon official wasn't enough, if the pictures weren't enough, here are the actual declassified files from the CIA. What do you want to say about that? Do you guys have a debunking for this? Are these, is there something else that could possibly be weird about UFOs? Look, the reason why I think this skeptic argument is so silly is because the skeptics keep going back to this idea of like, oh, we're seeing something pretty amazing, but it doesn't mean it's extraterrestrial. It doesn't mean it's coming out of this world. For the most part, UFO sightings have been happening even before World War II. It was happening, during the Renaissance period. You can see it in the paintings. So the argument that this craft could be something that's man-made, I think this argument has already been, it's a phony argument. It's already been debunked. Whatever this phenomenon is, it has been happening for a long, long time. And that is very, very important. So to finish off the episode, I wanted to go ahead and show you guys some images that one of my subscribers sent to me. And I'm going to keep his privacy. I'm just going to call him by his first name, Jamie. So him and his wife got these images from Ohio. And, I put these images through an authentication program. And basically what he told me is it came from his Samsung camera, which he admitted to me on the email. The date that it was claimed that these things were shot was the exact date that he gave me in the email. So that matched. The only thing I couldn't authenticate is the fact that these images had been previously resaved. He explained that he transferred from one drive to another. So that's the only thing that couldn't basically authenticate about this. But I did go ahead and take a look at the images through Photoshop, and I found some kind of interesting things. So here are the 3 images right over here that Jamie took with his wife. And, look interesting. I mean, it's obvious it's not an airplane. It's obvious it's not a drone. So let me show you what's going on over here. It's really kind of cool. So if you zoom in, what I decided to do is I decided to put a channel mixer on this UFO just to see what we get here. And what I thought was really cool is that you can see by isolating certain color channels, you can actually really get this force field looking type anomaly that's happening around this object. And this is not something that you usually see with airplanes or drones where you see a force field around the object. So very cool. I mean, if this is hoax, well done. To me, it doesn't look like it's hoax. I looked at another version, and let me show you what's going on here. So I just put the levels on, and I did another channel mixer. And this one, I isolated the red channel. And I thought it was really interesting because although this object looks completely white in the middle, when you put the channel mixer, you see that there's redness, not just around the force field area, but also inside the craft itself. So these are just little details that I think if you're trying to hoax something, it's hard to put all those layers and details into these images. Lastly, I want to show you the third image. And I wanted to show you what happens when I put the levels, when I increase the exposure basically, and really increase the contrast. And I want to show you this because look, you can see that whatever is creating this saucer-shaped object, it's illuminating from the very middle. So you can see that there's bands of different illumination and different frequencies of light, which is another thing that I think if you're just to randomly hoax this would be kind of difficult to add as a detail. But yeah, very interesting, Jamie. Thank you for sharing that. All right, guys. So yeah, that's pretty much it. But just to reiterate what I was saying from my previous episode, if you're a skeptic and you still don't think that there's something to this, I just want to let you know that UFOs, they're not going anywhere. So I guess good luck. All right, guys. Thanks for joining me. This is Felipe Osorio, signing out.
Do so want to believe that they're ET because it would make the world a more interesting place.